I buried my son 20 years ago. His grave still stands intact at the public cemetery in Greenwood Memorial Park, Queens. But at 2:47 a.m. this morning, my phone vibrated and a name lit up on the screen. Ethan Andrew Carter was calling. My hands went cold, my pulse spiked. I knew I was fully conscious, but a child who had been wrapped in burial cloths should never be able to call. Before the story begins, please write in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so the Stories with Meaning channel can continue to grow and bring you more compelling stories. My name is Harold Carter, 62 years old. I used to be an English teacher at a public middle school in Brooklyn. Now I'm retired, living alone in a narrow inherited row house behind Jackson Market. My wife Linda remarried a city clerk. We lost contact years ago. Since our divorce 17 years ago, Ethan has been my only child, my son, my flesh and blood. He died at 19. A motorcycle accident in Harlem, late Friday night, November 3rd, 2005. Every Sunday, I visit his grave. I bring fresh flowers, holy water, and quietly recite prayers. It's a routine I've never missed. The grave is always clean, the headstone solid, his name clearly engraved. Ethan Andrew Carter, born April 12, 1986. Died November 3rd, 2005. I know every letter by heart. Ethan's phone number is still saved in my old black Nokia, the screen cracked at the corner. The SIM card is still active. Every month I top it up, $15. A pointless ritual, a foolish way to feel close to him. There was never anyone to call, only silence. Until that night. Rain poured over Brooklyn since the afternoon. My body ached, so I went to bed earlier than usual, around 9 p.m. My room is small, a thin mattress, wooden windows that leak when the wind blows hard. I'm used to it. Retirement is simple. There's little left to expect. Then, at 2:47 a.m., my phone rang. A special ringtone, one I had set for only one contact. Ethan. My hands jolted awake, my heart pounding. The room was dark. Rain still drummed against the roof. With trembling hands, I grabbed the phone. The screen glowed brightly. Incoming call. Ethan Andrew Carter. Below the name was his contact photo. Ethan in high school, smiling wide, wearing a white and gray uniform. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, but the vibration was real. The ringtone kept playing. My hands shook violently. I pressed the green button and raised the phone to my ear. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse. Silence. Then breathing. Someone breathing in fear. And then a voice I knew better than my own, a voice that had been gone from my life for 20 years. "Dad, where am I?" My chest tightened, my breath caught. Why is everything dark? It was Ethan's voice, soft, trembling, like a lost child. This wasn't a recording, this wasn't a memory. It was alive. "Ethan," my voice barely came out. "Dad, I'm scared. I don't know where I am. Nobody sees me. Everyone walks right through me." His voice broke. A small sob escaped. Then he whispered, so softly, "I only remember this number." The call ended. The screen went dark. I sat frozen on the bed, my body shaking uncontrollably. My head spun. With trembling fingers, I turned on the light. The dim yellow glow filled the room. In my hand, the phone still showed the call log. Ethan Andrew Carter. Duration, 9 minutes, 43 seconds. Time, 2:47 a.m. I leaned against the wall, my back cold. I tried calling back. Ring, ring. Then the operator's voice. The number you are trying to reach is not in service. Again, same result. I slid down onto the floor. What had just happened? Was I losing my mind? But it felt too real. That was Ethan's voice. I'm his father. I know him better than anyone. I didn't sleep again that morning. I sat on the porch waiting for dawn. The rain had stopped. The air was cold and damp. After morning prayers, I wrote everything down. The time, the duration, every word he said. I even recorded a video of my phone showing the call log. I needed proof. That afternoon, I visited my old friend, Robert Hill, a retired math teacher. We used to work at the same school. I told him everything. I showed him the call log. He looked at me with concern and gently held my shoulder. You visit the grave too often, Harold. Maybe you were dreaming. Maybe exhaustion. I know that, but I also know what I heard. That evening, I went straight to Greenwood Memorial Park. Ethan's grave was exactly the same, clean, undisturbed. The flowers I brought last week hadn't even fully wilted. I sat beside the headstone, my hand resting on the cold stone. Ethan, was that really you? Only the wind answered. 4 nights later, at 2:15 a.m., the phone rang again. Same ringtone, same name. I answered immediately. Ethan? Dad. His voice was clearer this time, still trembling, but calmer. I don't know where I am. People walk right through me. I remember the accident. I remember the cold. I think I'm dead. But I'm still here. Tears streamed down my face. Where are you now? There was a long pause. I found a piece of paper. There's an address on it. I grabbed a pen. Block D8, Old Melrose Apartments, Midtown Manhattan. Dad, please come. Please pick me up. The call cut off. Again. The next morning, I drove there. The old apartment complex was fenced off with barbed wire, marked for demolition by the City Housing Authority. Every unit was chained shut, except one. Block D, Unit 8. Inside, it smelled of fresh coffee. The floor was clean. On the dining table sat warm takeout rice. And on the wall, a family photo. A photo I had no memory of ever taking. It felt as though someone had only just lived here. But how was that possible? This building had been sealed off. No electricity, no running water. In the living room stood a low wooden table, a small bookshelf, and walls filled with framed photographs. I stepped closer. My heart stopped. Every photo was Ethan. Ethan as a child. Ethan during his circumcision ceremony, wearing a white traditional shirt and cap, smiling wide though his eyes were swollen from crying. Ethan on his 10th birthday, standing in front of a cake with lit candles. A family photo taken during a holiday, me, Linda, and Ethan standing in front of our old house in Brooklyn. But there were photos that should not exist. Photos of Ethan as an adult, in his early 30s. One showed him standing in front of this very apartment building,
wearing a black jacket, hands in his pockets, taking a selfie at a small coffee stand, holding a plastic cup. Another showed him in a factory uniform, a yellow safety helmet on his head, smiling faintly. I pulled one photo from the wall. My hands shook violently. This was Ethan. His face, his eyes, his smile, but he looked far older than 19, as if he had never died, as if he had kept living for the last 20 years. I walked into the small kitchen beside the living room. A compact refrigerator hummed faintly. I opened it. Inside were fresh groceries, milk cartons, eggs, vegetables, all still good. On top of the fridge, a piece of paper was held by a magnet. I took it down. My hands trembled uncontrollably. The handwriting read, "Dad, I woke up here. Last week they told me my name is Michael, but I remember I am Ethan. I remember your face. I remember our home. I remember the accident. I remember the pain. I remember dying, and then I woke up. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know who I really am." At the bottom was a signature. I knew that handwriting. The way he drew the capital E, the way he underlined his name, exactly like on his elementary school report cards I still kept at home. I collapsed onto the floor. Tears poured uncontrollably. My chest tightened, my breath caught. This was real. All of it was real. Ethan was alive. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, but he was alive. I stood up on trembling legs and walked toward the small bedroom at the end of the unit. The door was open. Inside was a folding mattress, a thin blanket, a worn pillow. Beside the mattress sat a dark blue backpack. On a folding table lay a wallet. I opened it. Inside was an ID card. I took it out with shaking hands and read it slowly. Name, Michael Stephen Walker. Place and date of birth, New York City, April 12, 1986. Address, Block D8, Old Melrose Apartments, Midtown Manhattan. Same birthday, April 12, 1986. Ethan's birthday, but a different name, Michael Stephen Walker. I stared at the photo on the ID. Ethan's face, older, thinner, but unmistakably my son. I am his father. I know him. I sat on the bedroom floor, clutching the ID card. My mind raced. If Ethan had been living here, alive, under a different identity, then who had I buried 20 years ago? Who lay in Ethan's grave at Greenwood Memorial Park? Who had I prayed for every single Sunday? I returned to the living room, searching for more clues. On the small bookshelf were stacks of papers, old newspapers, grocery receipts, flyers, notes. I went through them one by one. Then I found a thin brown folder, worn with age. I opened it. Inside were medical records from St. Mark's General Hospital. I read slowly. Patient, unidentified. Admitted on November 3, 2005, 11:57 p.m. Condition, severe head trauma, facial and chest bruising. Status, coma, total memory loss. November 3, 2005. The same night Ethan's accident occurred. Ethan was officially pronounced dead at 11:51 p.m., only 6 minutes earlier. My vision blurred, my heart pounded violently. If this patient arrived 6 minutes after Ethan was declared dead, and if this patient survived, then who had actually died that night? Had the hospital misidentified the bodies? Had I buried the wrong person? I staggered out of Unit D8. My head spun. The world felt unsteady. I exited through the gap in the fence and walked back to my car. I collapsed into the driver's seat, resting my forehead on the steering wheel. My hands shook uncontrollably. I didn't know what to believe anymore, but one thing was certain. I had to return to St. Mark's General Hospital. I had to know what truly happened on the night of November 3rd, 2005. I had to know who really died and who lived. Because if Ethan was alive, then for 20 years I had mourned the wrong person. I had prayed for a soul that was not my son's. And I had lost 20 years with my own child. The next morning, I arrived at St. Mark's General Hospital carrying all the evidence I had found. The medical records, Michael Walker's ID card, printed call logs from my phone, all neatly organized in a blue plastic folder. I sat in the administrative waiting area, waiting for my turn. My hands trembled. My head still throbbed. I had barely slept. After nearly an hour, a nurse called my name. I was led into the office of the head of neurology, Dr. Susan Reynolds. I recognized the name from the medical records. The door opened. A woman in her 40s, wearing a white lab coat and glasses, sat behind her desk. She looked exhausted. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "Mr. Carter," her voice was barely audible. "Oh my God, I remember you." "You still remember me, doctor?" I asked stiffly. She stood up, pale. "How could I forget? I was a young resident then. The night of November 3rd, 2005, you came to the emergency department to identify your son's body." I sat down, my legs weak. I need to know what really happened that night. She sat back down, hands clasped tightly. Why come back after 20 years? I laid all the evidence on her desk, one by one. The medical records, Michael Walker's ID card, the call logs, the photographs. Her face grew paler by the second. Her hands trembled as she held the file. "Oh God," she whispered. "Where did you get this?" "I found it in an old apartment in Midtown Manhattan. There's a man living there under the name Michael Walker, but he called me from Ethan's number, my son's number, the one that's been inactive for 20 years. She covered her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. "Doctor," my voice shook. "There were 2 accident victims that night, weren't there?" She silenced for a long time. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes, that night was chaos. Multiple accident victims arrived almost simultaneously. 2 of them were young men, both from Harlem, both without clear identification, both in critical condition." Her voice trembled. "One was declared dead immediately. His injuries were too severe. His face was destroyed, covered in blood, unrecognizable. But he was wearing a jacket with the name Ethan embroidered on the back. So we assumed." "And the other?" I asked, barely breathing. "The other arrived 6 minutes later, critical condition, in a coma, but alive. No ID, no documents, total memory loss when he woke up." I stared at her. "Then how did one get buried as Ethan and the other live as Michael?" Dr. Reynolds rubbed her face with trembling hands. "That night, the emergency department lost power for 2 minutes. The backup generator malfunctioned. Records weren't fully entered into the system. Identification was rushed. You arrived around 1 a.m. We showed you the body we believed was your son. You were only given 15 minutes. You were crying. You confirmed it was Ethan and signed the paperwork. I remembered it clearly. Ethan's body covered in blood, his face swollen. I recognized him only by his build and his jacket."
"What do you mean?" I asked quietly. You said the emergency department was chaotic, but a mistake this big doesn't happen without negligence or someone deliberately ignoring procedure. Dr. Susan Reynolds fell silent. Her face grew even paler. Who was the head of the emergency department that night? I pressed. She let out a long breath. Dr. Martin Reynolds, she said softly. He's my uncle. He's retired now. I stared at her sharply. Did he know there was a mistake? I don't know, Mr. Carter, but I remember he was furious that night. He told me and the other doctors, just pick one, close the case, don't complicate things. He was angry about the paperwork, too many reports. My hands clenched into fists. Anger, disappointment, grief, all tangled into one unbearable weight. I need a DNA test, I said firmly. I need proof that Michael Stephen Walker is really Ethan. Dr. Reynolds nodded quickly. I'll help you. This was our mistake. We have to take responsibility. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out 2 sealed DNA swab kits. One is for you. One is for Michael. Take them to the lab on the 2nd floor. Tell them I authorized it. Results will be ready in 3 to 5 business days. I accepted the kits with trembling hands. Thank you, doctor. She looked at me with deep regret. Mr. Carter, I need to warn you. If this is true, if Michael really is Ethan, there will be people who won't like it. A mistake of this scale would embarrass the hospital and the city. They may try to bury the case again. I met her gaze. I don't care who's embarrassed. I only care about my son. She nodded slowly. I understand, but be careful. After leaving Dr. Reynolds' office, my thoughts were in chaos. I went down to the lab and submitted my DNA sample. The technician told me they would need Michael's sample for comparison. I kept the 2nd swab kit in my bag. On the drive home, I felt like I was being followed. A motorcycle without license plates stayed behind my car, always at the same distance. I turned left, then right. The motorcycle followed. My heart pounded. I sped up. Eventually, the bike disappeared at a corner. But the next day, my car tire was flat. Twice. In the morning, the front right tire was completely deflated. I had it patched at a nearby repair shop. That afternoon, the rear left tire went flat. The mechanic frowned. There's a nail stuck in it, but the angle's strange, looks intentional. That night, at 12:30 a.m., someone pounded on my front door. Hard, repeatedly. I jolted awake. Grabbing a wooden stick beside my bed, I crept toward the door. Who is it? No answer. The knocking stopped. I opened the door slowly. No one was there. Only cold night air. But on the porch floor lay a folded piece of paper. I picked it up with shaking hands. Written in thick black marker. Stop. Not everyone is strong enough to face the truth. My body trembled. Someone didn't want me digging deeper. Someone was afraid of the truth. But I didn't care. I had gone too far to turn back. The next day, I went to the city civil records office to request a copy of Ethan's death certificate. The clerk checked an old computer system, then frowned. Sir, in the digital database, Ethan Andrew Carter is still listed as alive. I froze. What? Yes, sir. There's no death record in the system. But I have a death certificate from 20 years ago. The clerk searched the old paper archives. After a long while, he found the file. There it was, red stamped, declared deceased, buried at Greenwood Memorial Park. That's strange, he said. It exists on paper, but not digitally. Maybe it was never updated when records were transferred. I left with my head full of questions. Everything traced back to the same date, November 3rd, 2005. That afternoon, I went to a small neighborhood church for evening prayer. Afterward, I noticed two men in formal suits standing across the street.
They were photographing me with a large camera. When I looked at them, they quickly got into a black car and drove away. I knew then I was being watched. That night, I sat at a small coffee stand near my house, trying to calm myself. A stranger suddenly sat at the table behind me. He didn't order anything, just stared. Then he spoke softly, his voice cold. "Don't dig too deep, sir. Sometimes what's buried should stay buried." I turned, but he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I walked home shaking. Fear crept in, but so did rage. Who were they? What were they hiding? That night, at 11:45 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Hello?" A man's deep voice responded, cold, threatening. "You're playing with fire. If you keep going, maybe this time Ethan will die for real." The call ended. I stared at my phone. My body went numb. The threat was real. They were serious. They knew everything. But I would not stop. Not now. Not when my son was alive. I would bring him home, no matter the cost. After getting authorization from Dr. Reynolds, I began investigating Michael Stephen Walker. I returned to Unit D8, this time more carefully. Inside a small cabinet, I found pay stubs. The company name was printed clearly. Westline Industrial Packaging Corporation, West Jersey Plant, Night Shift, Production Division. I wrote down the factory address. Then I hired a rideshare driver to observe Michael's routine from a distance. I paid him $100 for a week. He agreed. Over the next 7 days, he sent me updates. Michael worked evening shifts, break at 9 p.m., returned home around 1:30 a.m. He lived in a small rented room near the railway tracks, not at the old apartment. He only visited that place occasionally. Maybe it held special meaning for him. On Friday night, I went to the factory myself. The drive from Brooklyn to West Jersey took nearly 2 hours. Traffic was heavy until I reached the highway. I arrived near the factory gates around 9:30 p.m. The place was huge, tall fences, bright lights everywhere. I parked some distance away. My heart hammered. I didn't know what I would say, but I had to see him. I had to see my son. At 9:45 p.m., night shift workers came out for break. They gathered near a small food stand, smoking, chatting, drinking coffee. Then I saw him, a tall, thin man, skin darkened from years of factory work, in a dark blue uniform, a yellow safety helmet hanging from his belt, short hair, a tired face. But the moment he walked, I knew. The way he moved, the way he swung his arms. It was Ethan. My legs shook as I stepped out of the car. I walked slowly toward the stand. My heart felt like it would burst. "Michael," I said softly. He turned. His eyes looked at me, confused. "Yes, sir? We've met before." Oh, God. That voice, deeper, rougher, but unmistakably Ethan's. I stood there, unable to speak. My tears fell down my face. He looked worried. "Sir, are you okay? Are you sick?" "No," I said hoarsely. I need to talk, just for a moment." He hesitated, then nodded. We sat on a wooden bench nearby. He ordered black coffee. I said nothing. A long silence passed. I studied his face. Every detail was familiar. His nose, his brow, his ears, all Ethan. Then he spoke quietly. "Sir, I often see you in my dreams." I snapped my head toward him. "What?" "Yes, I don't know why, but I dream of an old man crying beside my bed. He looked like him," he added. My tears fell again. "Michael," I whispered, "do you ever feel like something is missing in your life?" He stared into his coffee for a long moment, then nodded. "Always. Since I woke up from a coma 20 years ago, I don't remember who I was. They told me my name was Michael Stephen Walker, but it never felt right." "What do you remember?" "The accident, sudden brakes, a loud crash, being thrown, then darkness, cold, pain." He rubbed his face with trembling hands. "I have a blank space in my memory from age 19 to 22. Nothing. I only remember waking up in social care, surrounded by strangers."
If I really am Ethan, then who is Michael, and why was my life stolen for 20 years? That question pierced straight through my heart. I couldn't answer him because I didn't know either. I pulled the DNA swab kit from my bag. "We need to be sure first with a DNA test. Are you willing?" Michael stared at the swab for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I want to know the truth." My hands trembled as I took the sample from inside his mouth. When it was done, I sealed the swab inside the sterile plastic bag. "The results will be ready in a few days," I said softly. "If it turns out you really are Ethan, would you come home? Our house is still there. Your room is exactly the same." Michael lowered his head deeply. "I don't know, sir. I've been Michael for 20 years. I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore." We sat in silence for a long time. When his break ended, he had to return to work. Before entering the factory gate, he turned back toward me. "Sir, thank you for looking for me. I've always felt alone, but now maybe there's hope." I drove home with a heart full of conflicting emotions. Joy because I had finally found my son, sorrow because he didn't remember me. 20 lost years could never be returned so easily. 2 days later, Michael called me. His voice was panicked. "Sir, I was called into human resources. They gave me a severe warning. They said I'm not allowed to communicate with outsiders outside of official procedures. They know you came to the factory." My heart pounded. What exactly did they say? They said if it happens again, I could be fired. They even said I could have legal trouble if I keep contacting you. Why do they care who you talk to? "I don't know, sir, but it feels like someone wants me silent. Someone doesn't want me remembering my past." That night, Michael called again, after midnight. His voice was shaking with fear. "Sir, my rented room was searched. Some people came claiming they were officers, but they didn't show a warrant. They tore everything apart, took some old papers and photos. They asked about you." I sat up in bed instantly. "What did they say about me?" "They said you're dangerous. They said you're trying to use me. But I don't believe them, sir. Your eyes don't lie. I believe you're telling the truth." "Michael, listen to me. You're in danger. They don't want the truth to come out. Be careful." "I know, sir, but I'm scared." The next morning, another threat arrived, this time by text message from an unknown number. "If you take your son back, we'll take his life for the second time." My hands shook as I stared at the phone. They were serious. That morning, I found the corpse of a crow hanging from my front gate. Its neck was tied with rope, its body splashed with red paint. On the wall beside it was a single word: silence. I reported it to the local police, but they only filed the report and said it was probably a prank. I knew then I was alone in this fight. 3 days later, Michael called again. This time, his voice was different. There was hope in it. "Sir, I think I've seen that place before." "What place?" "The hospital you mentioned, St. Mark's General Hospital. I dreamed about it last night. A quiet road, a gray building, a very clean room. I think that's where I woke up from my coma." My heart raced. "You're remembering something."
I remember a kind female doctor. She used to check on me, talk to me even when I couldn't respond. And there was a male doctor, harsh, always yelling at the nurses. Dr. Susan Reynolds and Dr. DeMar. It had to be them. Michael, I said firmly, we need to go there. We have to uncover everything. Will you come with me? He paused, then answered slowly but decisively. Yes, sir. I want to know who I really am. I'm tired of living as someone else. We agreed to meet at the hospital the next day. I would collect the DNA results and officially confirm his identity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt a storm coming. A truth buried for 20 years was about to surface, and I didn't know what would follow. But one thing was certain. I would not back down. My son was alive, and I would bring him home, no matter the risk, no matter the threat. Because he was Ethan. My blood, my son lost for 20 years. The DNA results. The official DNA results were out. 99.9% match. Michael Stephen Walker was Ethan Andrew Carter, my son. But if he was alive, then who had I buried, mourned, and prayed for over the past 20 years? That morning, I went to the forensic lab at St. Mark's General Hospital, my hands trembling. Michael was already waiting in the lobby, pale, red-eyed, clearly sleepless. At 10:15 a.m., the lab technician called my name. Inside a small room, a forensic doctor with thick glasses handed me a brown envelope. Mr. Harold Carter, these are the DNA test results you requested. I opened it slowly. Official hospital letterhead. My vision blurred with tears as I read. DNA Profile Sample 1, Harold Carter. DNA Profile Sample 2, Michael Stephen Walker. Match probability 99.9%. Conclusion, biological father-son relationship confirmed. My legs gave out. I collapsed into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Michael wrapped an arm around me. He was crying too. My son is alive. I hugged him tightly. He hugged me back. 20 lost years could never return so easily. Ethan, I whispered. You're Ethan. You're my son. He could only nod through his tears, clutching the DNA report like it might disappear. The grave. Dr. Susan Reynolds entered the room, her face serious. Mr. Carter, we now have strong evidence. Michael is Ethan, but this means a catastrophic error occurred 20 years ago. This wasn't just an error, I said coldly. This was negligence, or worse, intentional. She nodded. The hospital director has agreed to reopen the case, but there's one condition. What is it? We must confirm who is buried in Ethan's grave. We need to exhume it. My heart pounded violently. Exhumation meant reopening a wound sealed for 20 years. I'm ready, I said firmly. With an official recommendation letter from the hospital, Ethan and I submitted a request to the cemetery authority. After 4 agonizing days of permits and coordination, the exhumation was approved. Those 4 days were the longest of my life. Ethan stayed at my house. We talked endlessly. He told me about his life. I told him about his childhood. Slowly, fragments of memory returned. I remember the mango tree, he said one night. I fell from it when I was little. I looked at his chin. There it was, a small scar. Yes, you were 7. I warned you, but you climbed anyway. He smiled faintly. I'm starting to remember, little by little. The truth beneath the ground. On Sunday morning at dawn, we stood at the cemetery. Mist hung in the cold air. The gravestone read, Ethan Andrew Carter, born April 12, 1986, died November 3, 2005. Prayers were said. The digging began. After nearly an hour, the coffin was lifted. The shroud was opened carefully.
Only bones remained. But 3 things were immediately wrong. The burial knots, incorrect, rushed. The teeth, the lower right molar was intact, while Ethan's medical records showed it had been removed at age 15. A small tattoo on the left arm bone, a faded snake, and the initial B. "I don't have a tattoo," Ethan said quickly. "I'm afraid of needles." The religious leader looked at us gravely. "The one buried here is not your son." I collapsed to the ground, crying again, this time not from grief, but from relief and rage. Relief that Ethan lived, rage that I had prayed over a stranger's grave for 20 years. "Then who is he?" I whispered hoarsely. "Who has been lying here all this time?" Dr. Susan Reynolds knelt beside the remains, examining them closely. And that was when the real mystery began.
Dr. Susan Reynolds collected several samples to be sent to the lab. Based on the bone structure and height, she explained, this was a man in his early 20s who most likely died from severe trauma. But to confirm his identity, we'll need further forensic examination. The head of the neighborhood council suggested involving volunteers from a non-profit organization that specialized in missing persons. Perhaps there was a family that had been searching for a lost son from the same time period. 2 weeks later, after forensic analysis and cross-checking missing persons databases, we received shocking news. Based on bone structure, the tattoo, and dental records, the body buried under Ethan's name was most likely Brian Malone, a 23-year-old homeless man reported missing by his younger sister in early November 2005. Brian had been killed after being struck by a truck on a road in Harlem, about 1 kilometer from the site of Ethan's accident. The timing was almost identical, around 11 p.m. Brian was taken to St. Mark's General Hospital without identification, just like Ethan. Because of administrative chaos that night, the hospital mixed up the 2 cases. Ethan, who survived, was given a new identity, Michael Stephen Walker. Brian, who died, was buried under Ethan Andrew Carter's name. I searched for Brian's sister. Her name was Sarah Roman, a middle-aged woman living in a suburb outside New York. When I visited her home and told her everything, she broke down hysterically. "I've been looking for my brother for 20 years, she cried. "I reported it to the police, but nothing ever came of it. I thought he was dead. I just didn't know where he was buried. And now I find out he was buried under someone else's name?" We agreed to re-bury Brian properly, under his real identity, and give him the dignity he had been denied. But I wasn't finished. I needed to know who was responsible for this catastrophic mistake. Confronting the hospital. I returned to St. Mark's General Hospital, this time demanding a meeting with the hospital director. I brought everything: DNA reports, forensic reports, photos from the exhumation. The director's face went pale as he read through the documents. "Mr. Carter, this is a very serious failure. We will conduct an internal investigation." "That's not enough," I said firmly. "I want Dr. Daniel Harper questioned. He was the head of the emergency department that night. He was responsible for identification procedures." The director nodded weakly. "We will summon him." 3 days later, Dr. Harper was called in to testify. He was old now, white hair, wrinkled face, but his eyes were still sharp. In front of the hospital investigation team, he finally admitted it. That night was chaos. We were overwhelmed. Too many patients. I ordered the team to speed up identification, close the cases quickly. I didn't want to deal with endless reports. "So you admit your negligence caused 2 families to lose their children for 20 years?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. Dr. Harper lowered his head.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Didn't mean to?" I stood up, my voice rising. "My son lost 20 years of his life. He forgot who he was. He lived as someone else. And you say you didn't mean to?" He had no defense. Then came the most shocking revelation. Dr. Susan Reynolds handed me a copy of security footage from the emergency department on November 3, 2005. She had kept it privately for 20 years, afraid it might one day be needed. The footage clearly showed two patients arriving in different ambulances. One was taken directly to the morgue. The other was rushed into intensive care. Dr. Harper was seen giving rapid instructions, then ordering staff to turn off the cameras minutes later. Proof that the manipulation was deliberate. With this evidence, the case was escalated to the State Department of Health. Dr. Harper was stripped of all professional positions and reported to the Medical Ethics Board. The hospital director was forced to resign for failure to supervise procedures. But administrative punishment didn't matter to me. What mattered was my son's name. Restoring Ethan's identity. I filed an official request with the Department of Civil Records to restore Ethan Andrew Carter's identity, erase the false identity of Michael Stephen Walker, and reinstate all of his civil rights. The bureaucracy took 3 weeks, but in the end, Ethan received new official documents, state ID, family registry, everything restored under his real name. Still, Ethan kept his old ID, Michael Stephen Walker's, tucked behind the new one in his wallet. "Why keep it, son?" I asked. "As a reminder," he said quietly, "that I was once buried alive, so I never forget how precious identity and family are." I hugged my son tightly. 20 lost years could never return, but at least now we could live with truth instead of lies. Making the truth public. I knew one thing. This truth could not be buried again. Too many families had been hurt. I contacted Ryan Miller, a former student of mine, who was now an investigative journalist at a national online media outlet. He had always been sharp and principled. When he heard my story, his face turned grim. "Mr. Carter, this is huge. This isn't just hospital negligence. This is a human rights violation, a stolen identity, a family torn apart for 20 years. That's why I called you. I need this exposed." Ryan examined every piece of evidence, DNA reports, exhumation photos, security footage, testimonies. "If we publish this normally, it could be taken down," he warned. "We need something they can't silence." We planned a public memorial gathering at the neighborhood prayer hall, inviting residents, community leaders, hospital representatives, and police officials. That night, after prayers, I stood before the crowd. Tonight, I'm not only praying for my son. Tonight, I'm bringing him back to life. Gasps filled the room. The projector lit up. Photos appeared. Ethan as a child, DNA results, hospital footage, the exhumed grave. My son never died. He lived for 20 years under a false identity because of a fatal hospital failure. The room erupted. Then, Ethan stepped forward. "My name is Ethan Andrew Carter," he said, voice breaking. "For 20 years, I lived as someone else. Tonight, I'm finally home." People cried. Phones recorded. The truth spread like wildfire across New York. The next morning, Ryan's investigative article was published. "Buried Alive: The Story of a Man Who Lost 20 Years of His Life to a Hospital's Fatal Error." Within hours, it went viral. Officials fell. Charges followed. Justice finally moved. Epilogue. Ethan moved back home with me. His room was exactly as it had been 20 years ago. He started working again, closer to home. He enrolled in night classes to reclaim his education he'd lost. Linda, his mother, visited often. We were no longer husband and wife, but we were parents again, united for our son. One night, we sat on the porch beneath a star-filled sky. "Dad," Ethan said softly, "how many people were buried alive like me and never found their way back?" I looked at the sky. "I don't know, son, but because you spoke up, others now have hope." Ethan nodded. "Then our story is just beginning." I smiled, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Yes, son, our story is just beginning." Ethan Andrew Carter came back. Not just his name, but his soul, his identity, his life. And that was the greatest victory of my life.